الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good morning. On behalf of the UAE Internal Auditors Association, I have the pleasure of welcoming you to the second day of the second 3D virtual conference, which is held under the patronage of Her Excellency Sarah bint Yusuf Al Amiri, Minister of State for Advanced Technology. The chosen theme for the conference is Digitizing Your Professional Future. We will begin the first session for today with a panel discussion about what not to do in the future. The panelists are Aldrin Sequeira, Senior Vice President, Internal Audit at Dubai Holding; Aisha bin Luta, Director, Internal Audit Department, Acting Director, Risk Management and Information Security at Dubai Tourism; Joan Trace, Group Chief Internal Auditor at DP World; Mohammed Dukandar, Group Chief Internal Control and Audit Officer at Etisalat; Samantha Malik, Head of Internal Audit, Risk Assessment, Senior Audit Management Professional at ADQ. And the panel discussion moderator is Mr. Abdelkader Abeid Ali, Chairman of the Board at the UAE Internal Auditors Association. Ladies and gentlemen, join me in welcoming the panelists and the moderator to start their panel discussion.
Thank you very much, Sami. Appreciate it. And I would like to have a special welcome to all of our audience. Really, it's a pleasure to be in this. And being the moderator, it's really with immense pleasure. I'd like to really share that I really have the distinguished members with me. I'll be introducing them. And you will see that the combined experience of all who are actually in the panelists, not only the numbers of years of experience that each one of them is really under their belt, but also the different areas that we have and the different background is going to make this session as really one of the best sessions that I can see in terms of the experience and the storytelling that we're going to hear from the top-notch Chief Audit Executive in Dubai and in the UAE. Of course, nobody can ignore talking about what we have gone through in the last 1 year. For some of us, the word survival actually summarize what we have gone through. For the audit, it actually changed the paradigm of what we were doing. The auditors, what we were before, I think one of the best things, looking positively about the pandemic, really put the scene for us that auditors had to come in the front and be part of the top management to make sure we can help and navigate during these tough times. Some chief auditors had to do things unprecedented before. Some of them got their sleeve down on helping the management, and even to some areas, even to operation, and I've seen it because there was a need. Let me really go ahead and introduce the panelists, because I think this will be good. We will introduce him and then we'll start the questions. As you are used to, we welcome all of your questions. Please send your questions. I'll be more than happy to try and to take them. And if the question is directed to a person, please send that. Otherwise, I'll try and make sure that the question goes for the audience in the right way. And let me start first requesting the panel to give a brief introduction so you'd know their background and what they are. So let me start with Dukandar. Please introduce yourself, please. Go ahead.
Good morning to everyone, and thank you for the opportunity, Abdul Qadir. Myself, Mohammed Dukandar, the Chief Internal Control and Audit Officer for the Etisalat Group. I've been with Etisalat for 5 years. Prior to that, most of my experience is in the telco industry. So I'm hoping for today to give a sense and a flavor of what it was like to be a head of internal audit during the pandemic, and give a sense of what it meant to be in the mix of things in the telecommunications industry. And it was a very exciting time. So I'm looking forward to it. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Aisha, from your side, you're in a very special area, in the areas of I would say tourism. Tell us.
Good morning, everyone. Allow me first to express my deepest condolences to His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, Vice President, Prime Minister, and ruler of Dubai, on the passing of his brother, Sheikh Hamdan bin Rashid Al Maktoum. My name is Aisha Ruta. I'm a Director of Internal Audit and Risk Management, Information Security, Business Continuity at Dubai Tourism. I look after the organization and the tourism sector from an industry perspective. I'll be sharing with you experiences from the organization and the industry today.
Thank you, Aisha. I appreciate it. And I really would like to try to share the same thing that, you know, with the news that we've heard yesterday, we all, from the IIA and of everyone, that we will really pass our deepest condolences for His Highness Sheikh Mohammed on the bad news, but what we can say, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. I'll go past and I'll request Aldrin, introduce yourself, please.
Hey, Abdul Qadir, the panelists and all attendees this morning. My name is Aldrin Sequeira. I'm the Senior Vice President of Internal Audit at Dubai Holding. I've been an auditor, be it external or internal audit, for the last 27 years altogether, 16 of which have been with Dubai Holding and 11 with PricewaterhouseCoopers. I worked internationally in Australia, Papua New Guinea, and my favorite country, UAE.
Thanks, Aldrin. Appreciate it. I will go to ask Joanna.
Sure. Good morning. And firstly, thank you, Abdul Qadir, for the opportunity to join this esteemed panel today, and welcome to everybody that's listening as well. So my name is Joanne Trace. I am the Group Chief Internal Auditor at DP World. I have been with them since 2007, so 14 years now. And before that, I was working with PwC both in the UK and in the Dubai office as well.
Thanks a lot, Joanna. Last but not least, Samantha, from your side.
Thank you, Abdul Qadir. Good morning, everybody. It's an honor for me to be here talking about myself. So my name is Samantha Malik. I've been head of audit for ADQ, government-owned entity in Abu Dhabi, for the past slightly more than a year. And I hope to share my experiences of how challenging it can be for somebody to set up a department from scratch when you are in a lockdown mode.
Appreciate that. I appreciate it. Now, actually, that we've covered a brief introduction, let me really start. And I would like really start with Mohammed Dukandar. Mohammed, we know during the pandemic, as you said, the role of audit slightly, I don't want to say change, but changed dramatically. And dealing, especially at the infrastructure that, for example, Etisalat looks, and how important that it is to all of us. From your experience and in the last year, tell us, what did you really have to go through? And having what I always say that, you were driving at 120 with the same car, you were asked to actually drive it at 220. How did you do that? The question is to you, Mohammed.
Thank you, Abdul Qadir. So as you correctly said, things changed dramatically. The world of business changed dramatically due to COVID. And in many ways at Etisalat, we had to ramp up from 120, as you say, to 200 in terms of things that were already in place, but needed to be ramped up very quickly. As you correctly mentioned, Etisalat was quite a key role player when it came to infrastructure and allowing businesses and people to operate and to function during the pandemic and still at the moment. I mean, we all know how important it became for business to go digital and the need for infrastructure. Many people were stuck. In fact, the entire world was stuck in terms of traveling. So there was an urgent need for new ways to connect, new ways to interact, new ways to keep in touch with loved ones in other parts of the world. And then, of course, education. All our kids had needed to learn a new way of going to school. Universities went remote. So Etisalat as an organization needed to be there and able to deliver this increased demand on our services. As an organization and as a company, a telco, we've been investing in new technologies for decades now. So from a preparedness perspective, we were ready and able to deliver this. I mean, from 3G, 4G, and 5G within the UAE, which is almost 100% in terms of every building in the UAE. Our networks, our very resilient networks, global partnerships with on networks and cables, where it was very easy to enhance our internet bandwidth. All of that needed to happen very quickly and with a fast turnaround time. And for us as an internal audit function, it wasn't any different. The business was changing at a rapid pace, and we needed to keep up. So from that perspective, we had to fast track our transformation initiatives to a large extent. I mean, as I mentioned, a lot of this was already in place. We've been talking about digitalizing internal audit functions for a while now, but it really fast tracked, and we needed to increase our speed and get our initiatives on track quicker. We had to quickly look at the skill sets of our resources and our staff in terms of the diverse skills that was needed and for them to be able to deliver under these conditions. Another area that I think everyone probably has worked on is the increased use and leveraging technology that was available. The increased use of analytics, continuous auditing, RPAs, artificial intelligence. This came more and more into play, and we needed to leverage that to find different ways to be able to do our work, to work remotely. We needed to empower our staff to ensure that they were capable and they had the ability to do all of this work remotely. Of course, we needed to change. We needed to become much more agile, much more resilient, and be able to change with the change in the risk landscape. I think one thing that we did very well, and probably I would expect most of my counterparts as well, is the way we reported and the way we communicated changed as well. From a traditional audit approach where we took a lot of time in terms of planning, fieldwork, reporting, etc., that all went out the window, and we needed to become much quicker, shorter turnaround times, quick, concise reports, being part of the solution in terms of remediation, increase reporting to the likes of our stakeholders, executive management, the board, the audit committee, because everyone were looking to us for that added comfort during this very turbulent time. So that, Abdul Kader, is in a nutshell in terms of how things change within Etisalat in a very short space of time.
I appreciate that, Mohammed. Just Arba, just one thing I wanted to know is that, did you really have to, you were one of the organizations you were doing up, you did all that. Did you lose any people or added any people to your organization during this time?
It's an interesting question. I think from an Etisalat perspective, we were fortunate in the sense that we were not asked to cut jobs. So, however, we did lose people in other ways. I mean, for example, COVID brought on a whole new, should I say, angle for people that were maybe thinking of emigrating to other countries, and a lot of people chose to fast track their plans. So we did lose staff in that way. However, we also had to then look at other resourcing models. So we started doing much more co-sourcing and find different ways of getting the work done. But from a staffing perspective, we didn't lose staff, but at the same time, there were hiring freezes, so we didn't have the opportunity to hire more staff. So we had to learn how to do what we had to do much more with less, and use different operating models in terms of different resourcing models in terms of getting the work done.
Appreciate that. Thanks a lot. I'd like to turn to Aisha. Really, after we all know how, everyone had to actually become very much digitized. From your experience and knowing what you really were doing, can you really take us through the more on the digital and also the cyber experience during this time, because you were doing a lot and those things had to be looked after for. So from your perspective, Aisha, what was your action in that area?
Thank you, Abdul Qadir. Basically, I agree with you that the corona pandemic has presented with many challenges worldwide, despite all the closure that happened. well, it has challenged the journey of our excellence. We are facing a new reality today. Dubai and Dubai government has been pioneering in employing all those technology infrastructure from the beginning. I would add to Mr. Dukandar when he spoke about the technological infrastructure, by basically starting with the smart cities and the smart government, the cloud computing, Internet of Things, and the high-speed 5Gs. All of this has actually enabled us to ensure that we can continue throughout this pandemic. The Dubai government, under the leadership of His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, Vice President, ruler of Dubai, also focused from the beginning on those investments. In fact, actually, the Dubai Future Foundation just launched an initiative on 1 million Arab coders initiatives, which aims to employ 1 million young Arabs. Can you imagine 1 million young Arabs to be skilled up with the coding skills that are required for the labor market? And this shows how the city envisions the future of digitalization. I would say that digitalization and cyber resilience has been a very critical aspect of anyone's life, basically, as an individual, even as an entity, as a corporate, as an investor as well. So basically on how you can compete globally. I would also want to say that we have not succeeded from a thin air. As you're well aware that today we are not only having smart government and smart cities, but we also have smart individuals, right? Yeah. We are all today smart individuals. So speaking from a Dubai tourism perspective, I would say that we were at the forefront when it comes to digitalization, when it comes to our unique services, when it comes to our marketing operations, when it comes to our digital campaigns. So I would share with you some of the examples, actually, what we have done throughout the pandemic. We had to do continuous VPN vulnerability assessment because, you know, with opening up all the firewall, most of the firewall protocols, you have to make sure that your cyber resilience is at the most secure level. So we also implemented geofencing for a lot of the critical applications and websites to ensure that the risk is also mitigated. We have our continuous penetration testing team in place for all the applications and tools. We have enabled remote work in less than 8 hours for the entire operations of Dubai Tourism and for the group. And we were quite successful in that. And we were one of the very few entities that could actually achieve that in less than 8 hours. And thanks to our resilience, basically, that has enabled us to this. We also ensure the continuity of our critical information infrastructure, as all of our data, when it comes, you know, the tourism data and the hotel occupancy data, the events data. So there are a lot of data that is actually stored with Dubai Tourism, and which is critical for the government, critical for the destination, and for Dubai. So in addition, we have also done a lot of continuous access reviews, not only on our side, but also from a tourism perspective with the hotel industry. We have tested all our VR tests for our call center, for our IT infrastructure. And I think that these are the most key important things when it comes to cyber resilience. And we continue to do them and learn from our experiences and make sure that we prevent what if there is anything has happened. So this is generally from a cybersecurity perspective.
I appreciate, really appreciate all the information, and thanks a lot, Aisha. Let me move to Aldrin now. Talking about Aldrin, we know probably if airline was one of the airlines that one of the sectors that got hit the highest, we all know that you know, you're in a business managing hotels. That was one of the worst that actually got hit in the pandemic. I personally, you know, was really sad when I went to, for example, Emirates Towers, and I thought I'll plan a meeting in there, and when I went over there, Emirates Towers was actually closed. So I think, in a nutshell, the word survivor really applies to you very well, Aldrin. So I think from your perspective, tell us about your particular journey during the COVID-19, and let's see some of the stuff that you've actually learned in that particular area.
Sure.
Aldrin.
Thanks, Abdulkader. I mean, as you rightly said, to say travel and tourism was adversely affected is an understatement. And that's got, far-reaching consequences even towards retail, F&B, etc. But yes, the industry was on a survival mode, but as a result, internal audit had to step up its game and actually show they needed to add value proactively. There were a lot of things that made us kind of reassess our position. I think Mohammed alluded to it earlier, but continuous monitoring was one of the elements that we needed to kind of ramp up. As internal audit, we had to look at what are the kind of focus areas that we could look at remotely, but still add value to the key management. So, there were areas like weekly payments, purchases that we'd review, receivable positions that we'd look at, month-end closing kind of, that the reconciliations were done, journal batches posting, that the segregation of duties went compromised in any shape or form. Internal audit per se had to, ramp up its position. We had to actually add, change our position to be attending kind of project meetings, sitting with the C-suite, engaging with them, how to steer the business, not only looking at the current COVID situation, but the post-opening and how you are ready for that environment. Because as you rightly said, although things closed down, we had to look towards the future and see how can we reopen with efficiency and effectiveness. So, redesign the controls for reopening, horizon scanning for what's coming up, in terms of market conditions, because, the risk landscape changed considerably. A lot of new areas came in, liquidity, new regulations from, Dubai Municipality, DHA, etc. Crisis management stepped up a notch, business continuity management, etc. So we had to suddenly, be well familiar with all these touch points so we could steer the business in a positive way. So I hope that answers your question.
Thanks a lot. But, one of people would wonder, I know one of the areas in your industry, unfortunately, you had to try to deal with people, and it's a fact that I think you went through an experience a lot of us have gone through us, and actually letting people go. I mean, is that something? How did you handle that during that particular time?
It's a hard one because the whole organization was adversely affected, Abdulkader, and the whole industry from travel and tourism was adversely affected. So, the most important thing was you had to be kind of lean and effective. So the most, with budget constraints, etc., you had to make sure that you had to right size your audit team, but not cut it down to the bone. So, where then you're struggling to actually provide that assurance. The most important thing was making sure that you had the right team with the right focus. So as we were blessed that we didn't have to drastically cut the kind of size of the internal audit, but what we had to make do with was really changing the way we did audits. The traditional way of having the 12-month or 3-year audit plan was done away with. That was a thing of the past. We had to cut it down into sizable chunks for 6 months at a time to say, this is what I can look at, this is how I can focus and add value, and this is the size of the team to complement the assurance that you need. So, it wasn't the size of the team that mattered, it was really the effectiveness of what you brought to the table.
So, Aldrin, going forward, some of the things that you know that you would be doing different. You did mention that you are looking at 6 months audit plan. Any other things that you see that going forward that you're going to be actually taking that as a, I don't want to say as a lesson learned, everybody said that, but that part of the experience that you're going to do this going forward, or something that you will not do and leave anymore? I mean, that's something that you know you're not going to go back. Can you share some of those thoughts in that particular?
Sure, Abdulkader. I guess three key things that come to mind that were, I guess, positives from COVID that I will take on board when we move forward. You mentioned the agile kind of short-term planning. So we don't have a long-term plan. We've cut it down to 6 months. But even our scope previously was full scopes with financial, operational, IT. Now it's what are the key risks in that particular area, and have a limited scope so you actually target the right process with the right kind of risks. The other kind of areas that the second point that I got as a take home from COVID was we always said we'd work with the other assurance providers, be it external auditors, be it risk, be it compliance. Now is the time that you have to live with. You had to make sure that you're living the what you read. So it was the kind of lines of defense and working with each of them on what kind of assurance each one would provide to the overall management, so you don't duplicate efforts. And the third one is really the use of technology. If I rewind to about 18 months ago, if someone said you'd be doing a lot of meetings on Teams and Zoom, etc., I'll be saying, yeah, probably, but there's nothing like physical interaction. There's so much we can live and observe from physical interaction. Actually, I take that back, because there's so much you can do on using technology. Having said that, there is elements that you have to do physically, like spot checks, etc., that you can't do remotely. But I've learned so much through technology. I've learned to be more flexible. We can do audits using Microsoft Teams or Zoom, etc. These platforms are there to actually be enablers to our profession. So they weren't restricting. They were actual positive advancements.
Appreciate that. Thanks, Aldrin. I'm going to move to Joanna right now. Yes, looking at ports, which, yes, we all know in Dubai, we have probably one of the largest ports in the Middle East. And during the pandemics, things had to be working. And I don't think it was, okay, maybe the airlines traveling, but, the cargo, but something very important to trying to make the vines, you need to try to make sure, because the port is the vine where it actually will bring in the goods into the country. So I'd like you to talk us about that, and really focus on an area that we've had a discussion about, the well-being of the people within internal audit, because some of you experience with how to try and to deal in this particular area, knowing that a pandemic is around us. Take us through that, Joanna, please.
Thank you, will do. Well, I'll just take the first part of your question first, around how, the focus on keeping the supply chain moving and goods moving through the supply chain. I mean, DP World, as you're probably aware, we have a team now of over 50,000 people across the group, across the globe, working across 128 business units in 6 countries, and that's across maritime and inland terminals, marine services, industrial parks, and more recently, technology-driven logistics solutions as well. So a really diverse set of risks to look at. So business continuity was clearly the key area, and a number of all the BCP plans were invoked and set into action. And really, the immediate response we all had as an internal audit function was how audit really could still gain its relevance. The appetite had gone initially, and it really seemed out of touch with what was actually needed at a time when the business was focused on safety and the health of its employees, and then business continuity, and then onto cash conservation, onto CapEx and OpEx deferral. Our plan suddenly seemed out of touch with what was needed, as well as the fact that 60% of our plan was actually to be traveling overseas and visiting these business units, and we were now all grounded. So we decided to switch uniforms. With the blessing of the audit committee, we rephrased the question of can we still do our audits to a new question, which was simply how can we help? And we weren't sure what the answer was going to be, but we soon found out. We were soon receiving regular requests from the business for support, be that deep dives on the BCP plan, helping find controls most fraud risk as fraud risk increased, productivity deep dives on struggling terminals, revenue opportunity identification exercises, looking at credit management, emergency procurement, reviewing delegations of authority, cyber risk as well, which has already been mentioned today. And reflecting back now, a year later, we clocked 50 additional management requests to the 50 audits that we also received during 2020. So, you know, how did we actually manage to deliver on all of those management requests? We tapped into our guest auditor program. We had a really successful guest auditor program, which the main premise of was the opportunity to get on a plane and actually travel. So our first response, interestingly, was we decided to cancel it in 2020 because we decided it wasn't going to enjoy the usual benefits of the program. And we realized we'd made a mistake there because there was actually an opportunity to tap back into a number of the applicants that had actually applied the year before, but didn't have enough audits to accommodate some of these fantastic subject matter experts in their fields. And so we reached out to a number of those people that had applied previously, and we set up a virtual guest audit program and utilized the subject matter experts from across the group to support us and work with us on particular audits and some of these management requests that we received to actually help deliver on the mandate. So for us, that was a real success and a lesson learned for us really in trying to turn things into opportunities as well. And I think we also quickly realized that as auditors, I think Aldrin touched on this point as well, the governance risk landscape was changing fast. Fraud risk was increasing due to the environment, the decisions were at risk of bypassing existing controls. We took stock of that. And as auditors, we just ripped up the initial plan and we started building new products that were relevant to controls most at risk. So we designed a product called the Remote Controls Health Check, which we delivered, which was a really focused controls list of controls, the most critical ones, and really dumping the rest, and just focusing on things like digital sign-off, segregation of duties, emergency procurement, conflicting management objectives, cyber risk, and just made it really short and snappy to give us that temperature check on some of our lower risk business units, but still to keep the tempo up of auditing as well. I mean, look, we'd been auditing remotely for almost a year before the pandemic had happened, with mixed results, to be honest. So in infrastructure terms, we were well prepared for this new style of working. But the real change was in our auditees' willingness and ability to remotely work. I think everyone probably on the panel has experienced that as well. Now everyone is more than happy to receive audit in this type of environment. And look, the timing can be challenging. Our guys in our team have been extraordinary, and this will bring me on to the second part of your question, Abdulkader. We had to audit Hyperloop during the pandemic. Now, this company is based in LA. So we had our team having to work a shift for a couple of weeks from 8 p.m. to 2 o'clock in the morning, actually conducting all of their interviews with the staff there, which takes it strain on your employees as well. There's the physical aspect, many having to work from outside the home during the pandemic. Avoiding the infection was the primary physical concern. We had the psychological aspect, people working from home, dealing with their children, trying to preserve professionalism despite all the challenges, and the social aspect as well, missing out on the social engagement you get in the work environment, the water cooler chats. So that makes engagement and innovation tougher as well. And I think that one of my key learnings in this is that we should demonstrate that our customers or stakeholders, in our sense, do not come first. Our audit employees have to come first. And I've seen firsthand that if we take care of our audit teams, they will look after our customers and stakeholders. And I've seen it with my extraordinary team during the last year. And I've also heard some incredibly inspiring examples across other companies as well. And I think we've got to continue to work hard to support our team as they dealt with both practical and the well-being challenges of the current situation. So really, for me, it's about making the mental health of the team a real priority. and not being afraid to demonstrate some more empathic leadership. It's not a sign of weakness. So really not to underestimate the importance of this. I remember a question that the chair of the audit committee asked me, and it resonated with me, and I've used it with my team as well, which is when they ask you how you're doing and you say, I'm fine, you tell them, no, you're not fine. No one's fine in this environment. How are you really doing? How are you managing? And just really have those engaging conversations with your team to really push and just check in and make sure that they're doing okay. I know how much I appreciated it when you asked me the same question as well. And perhaps just a few other examples of how we can help boost personal resilience within the teams as well. One of the initiatives that our digital assurance solutions team came up with was we built a dashboard where they were tracking the time saved on our daily commute coming into work each day. And this was just the team within Dubai. And we were clocking up the number of days that was actually saved. And we asked the teams to utilize that time for training instead, to dedicate that time to upskilling themselves as well. And a number of people took that on board in the team and took on qualifications like CFE, the CIA, and training on particular systems that we use within the company as well. So it was great to see some of this feedback and innovation from the team members in terms of how they can really focus on their well-being, you know, putting in initiatives, running workshops on mindfulness, brainstorming with our audit leadership team on what does a resilient team actually look like. You know, is it high morale, mutually supportive, not afraid to challenge, physically healthy? And what can we do in our power to make that happen? What activities can we put in place and come up with our own toolkits for our colleagues as to how we can help improve that personal resilience within our team?
Really appreciate, I really like, bringing the guest auditors. And of course, everybody had to burn the midnight oil, especially when you have to try to audit something like the Hyperloop over there. And I really like the idea that, when you were able at this time to measure even the time to make sure that, this time when people are traveling, because we lose a lot of time in travel. I mean, I spend an average an hour and a half in the car, and that time can be utilized for doing something. And if you add that in the number of days into a year, I think this is a good idea to be able to try and to take that time and put it to training. Appreciate that, Joanna. Thanks a lot. Let me actually turn to Samantha. I mean, really, you've come into a new place with a big responsibility, and it's almost 90 entities. And then all of a sudden, you had to actually go ahead and develop a strategy to try to make sure, how would you look at that time? And at the worst time of ever, where it's going to be even difficult. So I think I'd like to really hear from your side is, I think the word strategy goes synonymous of what you needed to try to do at the level you are, and how you were able to try to make sure that with effective communication throughout the group you're looking for, Samantha.
Thank you, Abdulkader, for the question. So let me just take a step back and say, when we have joined I'm sure all of our heads of audit, when they take over, we've all read those articles saying the first 100 days of a CAE, right? So we've been taught that, look, the first 100 days is what makes you or breaks you. Mm-hmm. But in this case, in my case, when I took over, and I think I was in office for the first 3.5 weeks before we literally went into lockdown. And then the job started, right? So first of all, at that point in time, we were not really 90. We were about 1/3, and we've grown to 90 in the last year or so, right? So the first job was to get to know the people. So we literally spent every single minute of the day talking to people, trying to understand what are they doing, what is it that is causing them pain, and how can we help them get out of it, right? At the same time, we had at ADQ level our, the so-called Chinese walls between the second and third lines and even the first lines literally blurred out. So we were working shoulder to shoulder with people trying to provide assurance to management and audit committee that, risk mitigation plans in place are actually working, right? So when you have companies in 11 different sectors, so some of them are literally in survival mode, some of them are in overgear, and some of them, to take your example, were riding a car and now they're sitting in a boat. So literally the entire, business changes. So the risk has changed. So how do we get around doing that? So all this took quite a bit of time, but the silver lining of it was, for me, it was not 100 days. It was probably more around 250, right? So I had the luxury of time with me to be able to speak with each and every individual heads of audit. To answer your question in a nutshell, how we developed the strategy, we followed IIA's guideline. Literally to the T, we took every single step, jumped through every single hoop, and we came up with this strategy. But I think where we made the difference is when we took it to the audit committee to get their buy-in, right? So we've all been there, and we know that when we take our strategies to the audit committee, you get 20 minutes to probably half an hour to discuss it if your audit committee is feeling generous. So my question that I posed to myself was, should I spend this time taking the audit committee through how I arrived at the strategy, or should I spend this time trying to explain to them what the strategy is and get their buy-in on it so that we are aligned with it, right? So I chose to do the later. I basically boiled down my strategy to a single page, right? We obviously had our entire that 20-30 page of strategy document as an attachment to the audit committee pack, and goes for approval. All that is fine. So on a single page, I tried to explain to the audit committee, this is my vision. And when I say vision, I don't mean the vision as we see in our charter, right? Because we all have the same vision because it's part of the charter. So it's literally, what is your vision for the strategy? What are you trying to achieve through the strategy? So we started with that. We took about 8 or 9 different aspects of the strategy, and we said, okay, here we are. As of today, this is where we are. In the next 3 years, this is where I plan to be. And here are the steps. I've broken it down into 2 aspects. So one being the critical ones, which need to be addressed right away. And the other would be, what are the steps I'm going to take to get there? But the most interesting thing, I think, where we really debated and had a lot of discussion from the audit committee were the assumptions, right? So, when you take this strategy, it's one thing for the audit committee to say, yes, I agree. This looks fine, exactly what we expect from you. But it's another thing to say that, look, yes, I have these 5 steps. Step 1 is going to cost me X. Step 2 is going to need Y resources. Step 3 is going to take me with, I need both these things and I need your buy-in, and it's going to take so much of time and effort. So I think that discussion had a huge positive impact both for the audit committee and management as well as on the audit department, because we somehow managed to come to the same platform where we understood what was going to happen in clear terms with timelines, and they had, well, I won't say exact numbers, but they at least had ballpark numbers in terms of cost, budget, resource requirements, etc., etc. I think that for me was the biggest learning I took out from there, that look, audit committee's time is limited and it's a precious commodity. Use it wisely. Don't throw 70-page documents at them. Yes, your expectation is they're going to read it and come, but if you give them a 500-page audit committee pack, I can guarantee it they would have dozed off after the first 50 or odd pages, right? So that's I think the biggest learning I took from developing that strategy. And to be honest with you, when we presented the strategy, they actually said that yes, this is what we want. In a one-pager, you have a 15-minute discussion, everybody is aligned. if that answers your question.
In terms of, having some kind of uniformity of making sure all the audits department are aligned somehow in terms of their guidance, or, and being in line, as you said, you did your strategy in line with the IIA, but what did you do if you did anything in that area of how you can make sure all of the audit departments are complying to what you're looking for? Is there anything specific thing you did in that area?
Yes. So essentially, very early on, we ran a diagnostic kind of a review of our portfolio companies, especially the audit, risk, compliance, BCM kind of a thing. And as expected, they were in various levels of maturity all across the group. So we said, okay, let's take a two-prong approach. So the first thing we did is, the first decision we came to is, we are not going to have a uniform methodology for the group, because one size does not fit all, right? Especially when you have in 11 different sectors with different people. So we said, look, here is the baseline which we are going to use for us to be able to kind of compare apples to apples going forward. But you as an individual have your own autonomy to define your methodology, right? You have your methodology, but we will roll it up for reporting purposes at a later date. But the audit committee agreed that probably the easier thing would be to centralize the quality assurance function at ADQ. So we centralized it. So as of now, we run a quality assurance program for external certification at ADQ. And we are hoping to roll out in the next coming months a peer review program across the group, which would be a peer review in the literal sense of the term. So we would be requesting some of our heads of audit to kind of help us go through peer reviews for other members of the group. So, that's how we try, or we expect that people are going to learn from each other. We set up a couple of heads of audit meetings to kind of network and get what is coming up. One of the other aspects which we took up is we wanted to roll out the ambition model across the group, right? So we said, look, we're not going to judge you based on what you come up with, but be honest to yourself and tell us, where do you actually stand today in your own opinion, right? And then where do you want to be in an 18-month time frame? It's very easy for us to say that, look, we all want to be at the highest level, right? The question is, if you say highest level, when are you going to reach it? If you tell me you're going to reach it in the next 7 years, I'm not interested. I want actionable items, and where can I reach in 18 months? Yes, so we roll this ambition model, we update it, so we keep updating it every 6 months to kind of come up with where do we go forward. So that was an interesting discussion we had with the audit committee, where their question when we presented to them, and their question was, isn't your target a little too low? Why are you targeting 4 instead of a 5? So the buy-in was that, well, we can set 5 as a target for everybody, but then we will be asking, comparing a fish for its ability to climb a tree. We're not going to go anywhere with that. So each of us has our own pace of learning. So yes, eventually we will probably get somewhere closer to that 5 number, but it's not a magical number. And with all due respect, I don't think each of us need to be at 5. For us, some of them even at a 4 should be exceeding the expectations. So that's how we went about with it.
I appreciate that. Let me come back to Mohammed Dukandar at this moment, and you did talk about earlier that you tried different technology and you really listed them. But we know for a fact, especially when actually you're doing or you're trying different technology, some of the learning in that particular, some of them will not work. Some of them will not, you will not be able to succeed. And some of them, you would be surprised at what you really did. In that particular framework that, and I really focus on that, your experience during that pandemic, what did you really think that others can say, you've tried these technologies and they really were, embraced by both the organization and by the audit department?
Thank you, Abdul Qadir. So, I mean, from a technology front, what we have had in our function for a while now is a digital strategy, right? So we've got a digital strategy in place with clear timelines, clear critical milestones, and slowly over time increasing our arsenal of various tools that we use. I mean, based on what my colleagues have said, it goes without saying the use of MS Teams, Zoom, working remotely, that type of platform has worked really well. I think COVID has taught us that more and more technology, process, and people, given the opportunity, synchronize really well. And I think it's a momentum that we shouldn't lose going forward. So from a technology front, certainly the platforms of working remotely has made a huge difference. We've also seen, and I think Aldrin may have touched on this, is the receptiveness of the auditees in terms of working this way, and also the availability. Colleagues have also spoken about what has worked well in terms of time saving, and how well that has worked, and of course then freeing up your capacity to do other things on your audit plan, be training, and other things to do. So that has worked really well as far as technology goes. I think another thing that has also been very well received is the use of visualization tools. So the likes of Tableau and those of that nature, in addition to using data analytics tools. So this has gone a long way in making our lives much easier. It's gone a long way in terms of reporting, providing concise, visualized reports to our clients, visualized reports to the audit committee, where they get to see the entire picture in a very short space of time, and a short report. As Samantha mentioned, giving a 50-page, 60-page submission to the audit committee is really not the best use of time and also effort. So the visualization tools have come to the fore. As I mentioned, data analytics to a large extent, the use of ACL, data mining tools, those kind of tools that we have available have come to a large, have made a huge difference in the way we do work, and also forced us to become more innovative in how we do our audits. So I think the technology front has worked really well. If I have to add something on, I think the way we train ourselves and upskill our staff is another thing that has worked well. Online training, remote training, this has enabled us to get access to the likes of conferences and training that we would not normally get, because it would involve getting onto a plane, flying across the globe, lots of time, budget, all of that. So it's given us a whole new world, a whole universe in terms of availability of training to us. And we've taken that up at a great sort of level at Etisalat. LinkedIn is another platform where training is available, and it's literally gives you access to absolutely anything that you want to upskill your staff on. So I think the technology as a whole has worked really well in COVID. I know previously we were of the opinion that face-to-face is the best. And as Aldrin mentioned, there are certain things that you can't do without being there physically. For example, if you investigating, there's nothing, when you're doing an investigation, face-to-face interrogation or interview is really the best way to do it. It's very difficult to do that remotely. So some of that will still stay, but I think a lot will change going forward in terms of internal audit functions, digital strategies, they're digitizing their functions, and the use of all these various technology tools, because it's really the way of the future for us.
I know that Dukandar, you did say that you wanted to try and to leave, and I appreciate you joining. But I would really like you to try and to comment on the audit committee expectation from you, because, you know, as you said, it was really highlighted by Samantha during this time. It's so important to be able to effectively communicate and make sure that the perception or the facts are actually, and during this time, it also was difficult on the audit committee. From your side, and you're dealing with the audit committee, is there anything that you can actually share with us which would really add a lot of value to the other chief audit executive from that perspective?
Yeah, I think the board as a whole over COVID were much more were looking for much more comfort, and were much more involved in the business in terms of continuous board meetings and the need for feedback. And it wasn't any different with any of the subcommittees. For us, the audit, for myself and for chief audit executives, our key stakeholder being the audit committee. I mean, for me, continuous feedback to the audit committee was very important. In my time at Etisalat, last year was the year where we had the most amount of audit committees, because there was a need for much more communication, and there was a need for much more assurance. And the audit committee members had questions all the time, because things were changing so at such a fast pace. And we needed to give them very concise reporting and very clear in terms of what we are doing. I think a number of my colleagues have mentioned going to the audit committees and looking at different ways of how you manage to give the assurance. I mean, the long plans and of 3-year plans don't exist anymore. The audit plan has become completely dynamic. We look at it on a quarterly basis if anything major happens. And it was, as people would say, but what can change in a quarter? And we saw that last year. Things changed completely in over a space of days, let alone a quarter. So starting to look at the plan on a continuous basis is important. Building enough time into the plan as a buffer for management requests, because I think if anything, COVID has done, it's increased the view or improved the view of management towards internal audits, and the value that internal auditors and the value that they can bring when given the opportunity. And it was a huge opportunity for us to step up. So I think from an audit committee's perspective, the continuous overseeing or reviewing of the risk landscape from a short, medium, and long term is important. I think audit committee are looking much more to us to share foresight and not just a backward-looking view in terms of what we are seeing. I think the expectation for us is they want internal audit. I mean, one of the things that has become a critical, I think, strategic imperative is building resilience into your organization. Many companies fail because there was just not enough resilience built into the organization. So from that perspective, the audit committee looks to ourselves as auditors in when we're reviewing the operations to test for resilience, not something that we may not always have been doing. So they're looking for much more from us than just your traditional audit hat. A lot on the proactive side, a lot about what you see coming down the line, a lot about how you're going to use your technology much more, and a lot of how you benchmark yourselves with others. So I think the expectation from the audit committees has doubled with COVID, and as internal auditors, we have to step up to that as well. It's part of the transformation of the internal audit landscape and the industry.
I really appreciate, and I think, it's nice to hear that during that COVID time, you had more interaction with the audit committee, and the continuous really feedback from the audit committee is very important to try to make sure that the guidance is there for yourself and team. Thank you very much, really, on behalf of all of us. I know that you said you do have another commitment, but really we appreciate the time that you spent with us. Thank you, Mohammed, very much.
Thank you so much to yourself, Abdul Qadir, and the IIA, and also to my fellow members. I apologize that I had to leave. I would love to have stayed. It's such an interesting discussion, but I'll catch up with everyone at another time. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Take care. All right. Thanks a lot. Let me now move to Aisha. Aisha, with the expectation from the leaders, as you're saying, they're asking for more. from your perspectives, can you take us, what you really had, through the COVID-19, the journeys that you really had to do across the sectors and the destinations, from that perspective, can you, because I know this was really a lot of pressure on yourself, can you give us your journey you that time and your experience you during that time, Aisha?
Thank you, Abdul Qadir. I would actually start with when I speak about the journey of the tourism sector during the COVID-19. As you are well aware that Dubai tourism is a critical stakeholder in Dubai economy. So all the preparations and the monitoring started actually a bit early, started in December 2019. A lot of you might actually not know about that. But since the outbreak in Wuhan, we started to monitor the situation, where we actually entered into phase 0. So I would actually describe this entire pandemic into 4 phases until now. So we started with the Chinese New Year preparations. And within phase 0, we continuously monitored the global situation. We started to work with the authorities and to ensure that all the things and the risk assessments are going to be in place when they are needed, because we have to develop unique methodologies to fit the purpose, right? We haven't seen a pandemic before. And all of us here, I would say, including not only the panelists, but the attendees of this conference as well. So starting from phase 0, so moving to phase 1, I would say. And phase 1, we basically are aware of the emergency response phase and the suspension phase. So all those suspensions that happened, actually, they were done based on a thorough risk assessment, based on a data-driven analysis and all analytics that we had in place. So basically instant data that we receive from our systems, from our meetings with our stakeholders, from international chains, local chains, including the Jumeirah, like Aldrin said, and the Marriotts and the Hiltons, and all of our colleagues actually around the city. And what was happening at that point in time, we were discussing with one of the international chains, and they would say that, oh, something like that happened in Singapore, and we do have a best practice that we want to share with you, and maybe someone from another destination. Or we were cross-country cross-country sharing those best practices, until we actually went into phase 2, when I would say phase 2, which started basically by March, and we started to do all the suspensions. And at the same time, we had to make sure that all the compliance is in place, right? With all the precautionary measures that we have introduced. So that was one of the biggest challenges, especially with the I would say, with the psychological mindset of people who have not been into a lockdown, who have not been quarantined, who have not been into an isolation. So how do we as a city deal with all that? So that was quite a challenge, I would say, from a mental perspective. And I would actually add on Joanna on that at the end of my discussion, where she actually spoke about the mental well-being. We also introduced at our channel in the human resources or the human capital, we had a well-being campaign in Dubai tourism. So this well-being campaign introduced a lot of things, actually, from a lifestyle perspective, from what to actually eat, what not to eat, from basically how, if you need to vent, how would you actually, they had a full channel. So you basically even have like a half an hour to discuss your issues with the human resources. And then on top of that, we as management, we had to ensure our middle management as well were quite engaged with all the staff. So they had to ensure the daily check-ins, the daily check-outs of the team. They had to, so those check-ins and check-outs were not to manage the time, but rather than to check on them, whether they are okay, how they are feeling, do they feel the pressure, where do they need the support. And I usually have my weekly meetings. I had to have them not only weekly with the entire team that I have in place, but we had to continuously meet to ensure that everyone is on the same page. And when it comes to the crisis committee, when the situation started in Wuhan in December, we started to meet on weekly basis, and then suddenly we started to meet on day and day on alternative days. And I remember days when we had to meet twice a day because the situation was changing. So in the morning, we would say that this is the thing that we have to implement at the sector. And then we will receive a direction that we have to make sure while we implement this, we also consider different aspects on how this will impact the economy, how will this impact the health and well-being of all of our communities. So that was a bit of a challenge at that point in time. But at the same time, in March, we also had to work on the economic restart. So this is where all those, I would say, expertise from around Dubai tourism had to work all of them together. And when I would like to also touch the basis when Aldrin spoke about the human resources aspect, I would say, we introduced a cross-functional secondment program in Dubai tourism. So departments that were impacted, let's say that the events were suspended. So the events team would be basically now working on scenario planning for the events reopening. But at the same time, most of the people were seconded to other functions. And why is that? Just because there were other functions who were quite busy. So this cross-functional secondment program that we have introduced not only have reduced the pressure on the human capital of the entity, but also upgraded the skills of the people in the organization. In terms of the well-being, also, sorry, I forgot. When I think the Kandar spoke about the trainings as well. So we have an LMS platform, a learning management system, where we introduced a lot of behavioral training at the same time. One of the trainings was emotional intelligence. And I have mandated every single resource in my departments, including consultants, to actually go through this training, because this was quite important, not only for them. It was important for them to also how to understand their stakeholders and where is their emotional state and how they will be able to deal with them throughout the pandemic. So that was actually one of the key interesting trainings that we have actually introduced in our platforms. Moving to, I would say, June, where all the reopening activities started with the domestic activities, basically, I would say, starting with the domestic tourism, and working on the reopening protocols and the travel tourist protocols as well, which we basically welcomed our international tourists from July. We continuously monitor the situation. At the same time, to ensure that the trust is actually, basically there is a trust in the product, we introduced a program called Dubai Assure. Why I would want to focus on this program? Basically, most of the people, maybe from audit especially, they would say, why are we actually speaking about Dubai Assure? What is Dubai Assured actually? Dubai Assured is a program that gives you a stamp as a tourism establishment and a retail if you are compliant with all the precautionary measures. The stamp is given based on our inspections. And the way we managed to do this in Dubai government, it was, I'm very thankful for this actually. When we introduced this, it's an initiative of voluntary compliance. Usually compliance is very strict, but this is voluntary compliance. What I mean by voluntary compliance is that all the entities actually started to calling our call centers, our stakeholder team. We want to comply with this. We want to get the stamp. We want the tourists to come to our hotels. You have no idea the amount of calls that we have received that all of them wanted to participate in this initiative. So this program and this initiative made sure that this compliance is actually at the highest, and compliant with all the safety and precautionary measures. We've done this program with Dubai municipality, with the Dubai Economic Department, and we as a Dubai Tourism. And we have managed to do that with no additional cost. And this was our successful achievement, I would say, for that. We have also linked this to the World Travel and Tourism Safety Stamp, basically which Dubai have also gained in July. And basically now moving to September, where we start to continuously reevaluate all our scenarios with the reopening, started to have our basically events. So we started the events industry, including the international events when it comes to business. And that was in October, I would say. And we managed to basically host the largest two international exhibitions, which is GITEX and Gulf Food, which just recently happened, with more than 50,000 attendees, being the only destination in the world who can actually accommodate this large scale with all the stringent precautionary measures. At the same time, I would also want to highlight a few things when it comes to the event industry and the festival industry. And basically, why is that? Because Dubai is known for its events industry, whether it's business or leisure or sports. So we as a destination, we were the quickest cities to actually react to the pandemic. And we had the strictest lockdown. We have included stringent protocols in the sterilization program. So we had to do a lot of infrastructure development as well. So both from a leisure and business perspective, we haven't done that alone. We could have not done that alone. We worked with all the stakeholders, with the government authorities, with all our industry partners to ensure that we are all on the same page. So this continuous dialogue. We used to have this city briefings that probably a lot of the people are aware about, and my colleague here from Dubai Holding. So we used to have them on quarterly basis, and then we have introduced weekly webinar. And in some markets, we had to do them on daily basis. So imagine bringing all this trade and those partners into one platform. So we are all on the same page. That was the most critical thing. Communication was key to achieve what we have achieved today. So I would also, why I would want to focus also on the event side. And there is something unique that we have introduced here in Dubai Tourism when it comes to the events. We have introduced a very detailed, sophisticated event risk assessment methodology. We used to do our scenario planning for the events, for the mega event, for the New Year, for Eid in Dubai, for the festivals in a very unique way. However, in the pandemic, we had to introduce other factors, those factors that we haven't thought about. So let me explain to you what those factors were. So those risk indicators were. So whether those attendees were domestic, basically whether what was the venue type, was it indoor or outdoor, this all had an impact on the risk level. Whether there was international attendees, because as you are well aware that some markets were in the red zones, the other markets were in the green zones. So that was very, very, I would say, unique. And we had to take that into considerations, including whether there were international attendees, whether the event organizer is international. And we also had to make sure that we analyze the business impact, right? So it's not only the risk, but where is the business impact? So analyzing the business impact included the impact on the health and safety, and which we have not done this alone. We included in this exercise all the relevant stakeholders when we did this risk assessment. The Dubai Health Authority was with us in this exercise. We had to do more than 1,300 events per day for risk assessment because the risk was continuously changing. And some events, we had to do the risk assessment for them on daily basis until the event actually came on ground. We had to assess the economic and commercial impact. So that was in the beginning of the COVID. And then when we also reopened, we had to do the same risk assessment for the reopening and whether it's going to fulfill our vision for the post-COVID recovery or not, right? At the same time, we also had to consider our international relations and our political climate at the same time, because those international organizers or business partners and so many things around actually have a full distribution channel and market ties that we cannot compromise. And we have to make sure that all the things are in place. And I'm
going to have to stop here, Aisha, because I think because I've been told that we are running out of time, and I would like to try to conclude with really a very bulleted question. One is we always look into the positive side. So what I would like to go is back to Aldrin and ask him, the pandemic, what was the positive thing that you picked up from the pandemic? And then answer the final question, what would you not do going forward? So Aldrin.
Sure. The positive thing that I picked up on the pandemic is the importance of internal audit is its people. We are all about the brains, our team comprised of be it engineers, IT specialists, forensic specialists, Without engagement with the people and seeing their mental well-being, there is no internal audit. I think we took it for granted when we were all physically together and one team, and we engaged and we would occasionally meet. And then suddenly the lockdown happened and you had to connect. And people were going through a lot of personal circumstances. Some were single people, some were new parents expecting, etc. And you needed to make sure you kept tabs on your full team, their welfare, their mental state of mind, because you get the best out of individuals by working together as a team. And that engagement is probably the most important.
And the one thing that you will not do going forward?
I think I'm not going to do a 3-year plan that is set in stone and not flexible.
Okay, thanks a lot. Joanna, on the positive side, learning, and then the magical answer to what you will not do in the future.
Okay. So for me, I think what's become really apparent during this process, I'll second Aldrin's points on the mental well-being of the team is critical. And I was in awe, to be honest, of how the team just raised their game and delivered under these circumstances. I was just constantly surprised with the innovation that was demonstrated. But one of the areas that I think is next up on the list is that as internal auditors, we have to disrupt the way that we report. It has to change. Gone are the days when we can throw out 30-page reports of audit findings and expect that, and compel change. It's not going to happen. We have to, trying to get people's attention these days is harder than ever. This is getting attention is the new commodity. So we have to keep messaging short. You have to be innovative in the way that you write. We all need to improve our copywriting skills as auditors. Look at ways how you can deliver podcasts, produce videos. We all get the tools now to be able to do that ourselves without necessarily incurring a huge amount of cost. So videos, podcasts, write articles, focus on top 5s, top 10s, make messaging as short and crisp as possible to get people's attention, whether it's your audit committee, whether it's your regional heads, whether it's your top management, because time is of the essence. And for us to be able to be agents of change, we have to make change happen as quickly as possible. So for me, disruption of reporting is our next big agenda item to focus on. And what will I not do in the future? That's a tough one, actually. There's a few things, but I guess, what would I not do in the future? Yeah, I'm going to have to go with Aldrin's on the plan. Our plan is changing daily. The plan changes daily, and to embrace that. And I will not be afraid to reach out more to our chair of the audit committee. One of the biggest benefits that came out of this pandemic for me was that I caught up with the chair on a fortnightly basis. He reached out fortnightly to have conversations. And to be honest, we've built up such a strong working relationship as a result of that. I truly understand what he's looking for, what his concern points are. And the best bit was we've introduced him to come and join our team meetings. So he gets to meet the team on a monthly basis now, and they can actually engage with him directly, which is kind of an unheard of, right? It's usually the chief audit executive's domain where they go with their audit committees. But it's incredible how motivating that is for the audit team, because they get to hear it directly from the audit committee. A, we value the work that you're doing. And B, these are the things that are keeping me up at night. So please make sure that you guys are focusing on them. So those would be my wrap up.
I appreciate it. I'll go to Samantha in 1 minute. The summary is you've really done things. What you take as a positive, and would you say what you will not do going forward? Samantha.
Thank you, Abdul Qadir. So I would say what I take as a positive is we figured out finally what, given the close interactions we've had during COVID, and it was way more than what any of us are normally used to, right? So we finally figured out what probably the audit committee really wants from us, which is, to put it in a nutshell, is don't come back to me after a transaction has happened, 18 months ago and tell me that, something went wrong there. If something is going wrong, I need to know now.
I appreciate that.
That is the first thing. Second thing, which I think the audit committee expects from all the audit departments is provide me assurance on the transactions as a whole. Don't give me 31 samples and say that, look, I hope everything else is okay. So the higher level of assurance on a more timely manner. And what I would not do in going forward would be more in terms of, again, I would say two things. One is we as internal audit need to realize that gone are those days when we could be general specialists, right? So we specialize in everything, kind of a thing. We need to have real specialists in the team who should be able to, take a lead in terms of where we are going under a specific situation. Yes, the head of audit needs to provide, the vision and the guidance, etc. But you still need the specialists in the team to be able to lead it. The second thing I would say is leave the mundane work to the machine, right? So if you have set up your systems correctly, they should be able to flag issues as and when they happen. So then you have your resources freed up to do something which can really add value to management, right? So if they're asking you for consultation in terms of vetting a strategy, then vet the strategy. I mean, don't worry. The assurance, the ticking that box, as we call it, is being taken care of by the machines, and they're doing it much better than we will ever be able to do it.
I appreciate that, really, Samantha. I'll just go last and end up with Aisha. The things that you will not do going forward, and this is really, what is it, that after all that, what is the thing that you're not going to do going forward?
Before jumping into what we won't do in the future, I would actually want to say that we are quite fortunate that we had a strong, decisive leadership that helped us and enabled us in the way that we have transformed all those challenges into opportunities. So a key thing that I would want to share here, actually, what we won't do in the future, is basically some of the decisions usually have taken time, right? A week, or in some other organization, maybe some decisions take months and it takes time, right? But with the pandemic, see how we were agile when we were taking those decisions. So I will continue to take those decisive decisions and strong decisions on ongoing basis, and to make sure that these decisions are instant rather than waiting for a week or longer. So I think that's a key learning for us, all of us.
I really appreciate it, because we've got a couple of minutes over the time. I really just want to, on behalf of the IIA, I really would like to thank you very much for taking the time to being with us, and we look forward to actually bringing you back. I think we could have taken another hour in our discussion, but I just want to say thank you, everybody, and thanks a lot. Take care of yourself.